You have been through some shit.
Sure have. Haven't we all? We all have a story.
We're Candace
and Tanya. We're sisters, we're moms, we're wives.
and we're from the True North, strong and free.
And we're letting you in on our real life experiences, struggles, weirdness, finding the funny in the random every day.
And those moments that make you shake your head. We all have them. Those moments that make you say, honest to God.
Honest to God!
Hi guys, let's do this.
I'm Can.
I'm Tan. Welcome to our special guest,
Jaime! Hey, everybody. You're in the house. I'm excited to be here today. We're excited to have you. Our low, awkward voices are already rubbing off on her.
we're just talking about what our honest to God moments would be for this episode.
Honest to God moments.
And I thought of this morning, it's always a freaking hassle when I'm trying to get to the 9:30 gym class. And of course, it's always those freaking days that Ivy doesn't want to be cooperative. She wants to not wear anything. She doesn't want to put her shoes on or her socks on. Needless to say, I was 10, maybe 15 minutes late for this class. But I was like, I'm here. I'm determined to go because I can't wait and go to the next one because podcast. I had to be here to do the podcast. So this freaking class is so busy on Monday mornings. So I went in the class, and the only spot left in the class is at the very, very front.
Of course it was.
And it was body pump. So if anyone goes to Good Life, you're familiar with what body pump is. So it's all the equipment,
You're
all the
setting
weights.
yourself up.
Yeah. So I was like it was already like 3 songs deep. I was that late.
Oh my God. See, I would have abandoned shit by that point. I would be like,
I
okay,
know.
it's not meant to happen for me today. I'm gonna
But
go
I
get a
walked
coffee
in
instead.
and was like, freaking hell, there's barely any weights left because it's that packed and I'm that late. But now everyone has seen me walk in, so I can't chicken out now.
Yeah.
And the only spot left is at the very front. So I had to walk in between all these people. And the song finishes, and of course the instructor goes, well, hi there. So everyone is already looking at me, and now they're looking at me again. I'm like, hey, hi guys. Yeah. Monday morning, trying to get myself to the gym.
That's
Then
why I
had
work
that
out at
freaking
home.
moment. Yeah, I know. I find it so much. I have no problem getting myself out the door to the gym. No problem. It takes so much more motivation for me to work out at home.
I think maybe just because I got into the groove of doing it.
Yeah.
And now it's just...
Well, that's why I like the workout videos. There's so many on YouTube, or there's so many different, because they are personal trainers like telling you what to do. And they always seem to freaking say, don't stop at like the right time. I'm like, damn you. I was just about to stop.
Yeah, see,
Always
that's what I
happens.
need, because I'm not going to stop in the middle of when I'm in a class in front of everybody. You know, I'm going to keep going because I don't want to be the one that stops.
Yeah.
But if I'm at home, I'm like, screw you guys. Nobody can see me stopping right now.
I know. I push myself so much harder at the gym with everyone there. 'Cause
totally.
no one else is
Yeah.
stopping. So I'm
It
like,
keeps
well,
you
I can't
accountable.
stop. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's so much less effort to actually do it at home. But it's so much harder for me to do it at home.
Yeah, I agree.
It's much more effort to get myself ready, to get a freaking toddler ready, get her out the door, to be there at a specific time. If I try and work out at home, Ivy is climbing all over me. I can't do freaking even 10 sit-ups in a row because she wants to climb on me. So I get frustrated. I need that hour just for my
Yeah,
insanity.
she's in daycare and you've
she's
got
in
it
the
all to
daycare,
yourself.
I have it.
For sure.
Anyway.
Speaking of Ivy,
Yeah.
Ivy had her first sleepover this weekend.
Yeah, she did.
At my place.
Your house.
Yes, it was so fun. She had a blast. I had a blast. And she loves me. Such a cute age, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I have a 2-year-old as well, and I find everything is just big. It's big hugs, big kisses, big meltdowns, big everything is just
everything
huge
is
at that
big.
age.
Yeah, totally.
It's so sweet.
And she was so cuddly. Like she is totally Uncle Andy's girl for sure. Like she loves Andy. Like anytime he's around, he sits on the couch beside her. She just snuggles right into him. Like it's so cute. She was so snuggly the whole weekend.
It's so
It's
sweet.
the best. Can't get enough.
my God, sweet.
Now she's with her other auntie, Auntie
Yes.
Allie, while we're recording this.
Yeah.
Thank God for the aunties.
Yeah, she's surrounded by auntie love and uncle love. That's
Up
for
from
sure.
the auntie.
I think I saw Auntie Allie this morning.
Did you? Oh, at the school?
She was walking the kids
Yeah.
kids to school. I was like,
okay.
I know you.
That's my new hashtag whenever I post something with her.
Up the ante.
Upping the ante.
Yeah.
That's cute.
That's amazing. That's so clever.
So I stopped at Starbucks on the way here, of course. We're sitting here drinking Starbucks in yoga pants. Except for Jamie. Jamie's the only one that put on jeans for the occasion. We're in
Leggings.
like, sweats and yoga pants.
Yeah.
But with full foundation.
I was shopping this morning, so I was at the Oshawa Center, so.
But I stopped in to get the coffees, but they didn't put it in a tray, right? You know, the trays that you carry out. So I said, excuse me, can I have a tray? So the guy turns around and grabs a full serving tray and hands it to me. A metal serving tray. What? I mean, like a takeout tray, the cardboard one. It's like, what the crack am I going to do with a Starbucks serving tray?
Yeah.
Like,
Did you want me to take this home?
I
Bring
know.
it back tomorrow? Or what?
it's like, why do you even have these? Like, why would I be asking for this?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, it made me laugh. Hilarious.
Oh, that's something I would do.
A Monday thing.
Yeah.
I think the weekend with not knowing if the strike was going on, there was a few honest to God moments of just, are they going back to school? Are they not? And then, my 10-year-old's like, I don't want to go to school this morning.
Yeah.
Too bad. You're
Full-blown
going.
meltdowns probably
Yeah.
from so many kids.
Yeah, so many kids thinking that maybe they'd have
Day off. Psych. You're going to school.
You're going to school.
I've had plenty of honest to God moments with my teenage daughter. It's been fun with her lately. She's a wonderful girl, but teenage girls, teenage issues is just,
It's a lot.
oh, and you're just thinking like, okay, what do I do? Where's the answers? How do I handle this? Like, and
Who
then
has the
attitudes are flaring and, attitudes, hormones, it's just a recipe for a disaster. It really is.
Girls seem to start younger with that as well, because I have a 20-year-old son and a 10-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old daughter, and I found with my son, he didn't really become a teenager until he was 14. Like, it seemed later, whereas my 10-year-old, favorite word right now is rude. It's not necessarily what she's saying, it's how she's saying it. I'm like, are you 10?
Yeah.
Oh,
the
man.
I know, because Jake is kind of that way too. A little bit.
Jake's pretty laid back.
Yeah,
he has his moments here and there
Yeah.
when he can just be relentless, but he's not getting his way. But for the most part, guys are different. Boys are different. They tend to be just more laid back and,
I'm going to be in
with the
in
flow.
for it, I think, with Ivy. She already, when she's not happy with something, she's like,
yeah, she totally screams.
I'm not even exaggerating. That's exactly how she screams.
Rose is like that too, my 2-year-old. The other two never had temper tantrums, but she has full-on meltdowns. If she doesn't get snacks or applesauce, look out.
Ivy's on to the apple juice right now. Everything is apple juice, apple juice.
Oh, yeah. Then they get older and everything is, why not? Why not? Oh, my God. Why do you want to control my life? Why do you hate me so much?
Why can't I wear that?
Now it's like, can you not just want apple juice, please? Yeah. I can give you apple juice.
Like, screw you and your apple juice problems.
That's exactly what that was.
Oh, my God.
So true. Little people, little problems.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
But still, they're hard to deal with. Like meltdowns in grocery stores. Like I had a few honest to God moments like that where I think I was telling you, Tanya, a couple months ago, I had to buy a life jacket for my daughter and I went into Canadian Tire. It was like 7:30 in the morning. And so really didn't want to be there. And so the toddler, Rose, is just having a total meltdown. So I have her kind of slung over my shoulder, trying to buy a life jacket. And everyone in the lineup is like, oh, and I'm standing there going, can I pay for this and go?
Yeah.
And they're all like, oh, she's having a meltdown, isn't that fun?
Yeah.
No, move. Let me pay for this. Let me get out of here.
You can see I'm clearly struggling very much. Can you just let me go ahead and pay for this? And
No,
leave?
I had to stand with a toddler over my arm, screaming while the 4 people in front of me paid for what they were there for.
Oh, my land.
Yeah, that was kind of like, really?
Rude.
Okay. Rude. Pretty sure Lila said that, actually. Rude. It's nice, though, if another mom gives you a smile, though. So,
Yes.
whereas, the judgmental eyes of...
Yeah.
That's the worst.
Just to
I
get a
always try
smile.
to avoid eye contact when I see someone is struggling with their child because I never know how they're going. I don't know. I don't want them to feel like everyone's watching them. So I try to just like ignore them. And then if I do make eye contact, I'll smile.
You try to just pretend I'm not noticing. This is not a big deal. Everybody's not staring at you.
Yeah. I try to just like, okay, I'm just going to pretend like that's not happening because that's what I would hope that you would do.
Yeah. Well, what do you say, Tan?
I say,
hashtag, let's get this party started.
Honest to God.
Alrighty. Well, shall we dive into the good stuff of this episode?
I think we should. So Jaime and I have been friends for, I don't know, maybe like 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, Cole turned 20 last week.
Yeah, so and I feel like he was just kind of entering teenage years when we met.
Yeah.
Jamie's here to talk about a journey that she's been on with her son.
Yes.
To be able to see where the journey started and to where the journey is now as your friend has been really tough to see you go through at times, really a heart-wrenching of just hearing some of the things that you've had to go through and witness and deal with and make sense of, and to see where you are now is just, there's so much relief and joy and happiness. And so we'll just let you tell where it starts and
you. Sure. I guess now what I realize is that I'm the mother of a recovering drug addict. I think it took a few years to realize that that's what was going on. I think we live in a society that accepts a certain amount of drug use from teenagers and looks at it kind of as normal or, you know, experimental. So I think navigating that and trying to figure out what was going on was difficult. But now I'm in a position, and he's also in a position as well, where he accepts where he's at. He recognizes that he does have a drug addiction. Cole, I just love saying his name. It's my baby. He's my baby. He really is. Right from the get-go, he was fast and furious. You know, like when I think back to even like his labor, like the labor I had with him was 2 hours start to finish. Barely got to the hospital. Here he comes, 10 pounds of coal. You know, he's just been like fast and furious, like right from the get-go, and you know, never really slept well and struggled a little bit in school when he was little. Me and his dad went through a divorce as well, so I don't know whether that had any impact. Well, it definitely would have an impact on him, but he was very young.
Right.
He was always a joy to be around, always fun, always kind of a clown, so much fun to be around, just would make people laugh. That was what he enjoyed doing. He struggled in regular public school, and around grade 6, we pulled him out of public school and put him in private Christian education so that he would have some more one-on-one attention with the teacher, because he was struggling and we didn't feel that public school was helping him. I think a lot of people feel that too, to have kids that struggle. He was identified as having ADHD, so he had problems with focusing. For me, I didn't really want to medicate, and I know that that's a bit of a double-edged sword for some people. Some people believe in medication, some people don't. I didn't want to with him. In hindsight, I think that I feel maybe I should have explored that avenue a little more. I think statistically, who knows what would have happened, really? I mean, hindsight's always 20/20. Right? Would it have helped? Would it not have helped? Who knows?
Yeah.
But he did really well at the Christian school for a few years. Things were good. And then, right around the time that we met you, Candace, things started to not go so well. He was starting to become a teenager. He was starting to struggle with friends. And at this time, because I didn't grow up as a Christian, I became a Christian right around the time he started going to a Christian private school. I was thinking, oh, okay, I have to put some Sundays in if I'm going to send my kid to Christian school. Don't want to confuse the kid.
Yeah.
And then my life changed. So he was struggling. And I actually remember the day that I knew something was wrong. I was being baptized. And as I actually came out of the water, I could see him on the horizon, and just the look on his face, I knew something was wrong. Literally, the moment I came out of the water, I was like, something is wrong with my son. Wow. I don't know what it was. And he just kept telling me he didn't feel well. He didn't remember what happened 5 minutes ago. Everything was messed up. So we took him to the hospital, which the first thing they do at the hospital is they drug test them, and everything came back clean. So we didn't think that there was a drug problem. They thought actually he was having seizures, mini little seizures that sometimes they can be completely conscious for. That's what they thought was going on. So at the time, my dad, being the great guy that he is, kind of swooped in and was like, okay, we're going to send him to the States for all this testing. We're going to do MRIs and EKGs and figure out what's going on, because in Canada it would have taken longer to figure out what was going on. So we took him down to the States. Everything came back fine. We came back to the pediatrician. They said, okay, we want him to see a psychiatrist. And I remember them saying that to me and thinking, psychiatrist? What? Why would he need to see a psychiatrist? That's like a head doctor.
Right.
What's going on? And I couldn't understand. After seeing the psychiatrist thought that it was mental illness. And once we delved deeper and Cole became more honest, at this time he would have been 13. He said that he had been smoking a fair amount of pot. I don't know why it didn't come up on the drug testing. So they diagnosed him with drug-induced psychosis. So he'd had a mental health reaction to smoking pot, which isn't really widely talked about, well known. Right. So it seemed kind of unusual. He still felt like he was in this state. They called it derealization. So he felt like he was behind glass or he was dreaming. That's how the best way he knew how to explain it to us. Like he felt like the world he was in was not real. So that was difficult to deal with. So then they wanted to throw him on all these medications, different medications, to try and bring him out of that. A lot of them were used to treat schizophrenia. So it was scary for a while.
Right.
Dealing with that. And then some of them medications, the reactions he would have, you know, like I remember one time he couldn't talk properly because his tongue was moving. It was so scary. This was just a side effect of the medication. Anyway, so trying to find medication, I think, in the mental health world is difficult as well. As well as getting, you know, counseling to help. You know, medication is just one part of the puzzle. Yeah, so in trying to find a medication to work for him and to help and counseling, he just became more and more depressed. And he ended up suicidal. He was probably about 14. That was really hard. You know, I think a lot of people don't realize how difficult it is unless you're living in the house with somebody that's going through that. You know, you've got opinions coming in from, you know, my parents, you know, his grandparents. Oh, you have to do this. 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 Everyone's got an opinion when it comes to mental health, I find. And addiction as well. Everyone has an idea of what you should be doing so that, you know, it doesn't happen. So he ended up spending a few days in Oshawa Hospital.
How did you find that out? Was he just open with
you?
He was
very
it?
open. Yeah. So he had intrusive thoughts. So these were thoughts that would come into his head that he had a hard time pushing out. We all get intrusive thoughts. You know, we'll think of something and we're like, oh, that's weird. Stop thinking about that. And, you know, you can generally shoot the thought out. With him, he would have intrusive thoughts. How he explained it to me that were just like, die, 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 die. Wow. And that's what his thoughts would tell him. I remember being at a wedding and getting a phone call from him that, you know, he wanted me to come home. So it was a scary time for him. It was a scary time for me as well, being his mom, and just kind of, you know, at that point he was still fairly young as well, and just, you know, holding him. And at that point they didn't know what to do with him either. So they were just prescribing benzodiazepines, which take away that fear and that anxiety, but they're also very addictive as well. I remember as I think back on it and seeing him on benzodiazepines, I would kind of laugh because it was almost like he was drunk.
Right. But
he was very relaxed. So to see him in that state rather than the state he was in before, I was okay with that. Right. Not realizing kind of what could be happening with that. Right. Like what
could be brewing.
Yeah, with that. So he spent a few days in Oshawa Hospital. So yeah, he told me about the intrusive thoughts, and then he told me that he saw a razor and wanted to slit his wrists. So I removed all that stuff because we were waiting for a bed in Oshawa Hospital as well. And then one of his friends told me that he was walking down the middle of Simcoe Street, kind of in the middle of the road. So that's when I picked him up and took him into the hospital. We went straight into Emerge, and they found a bed for him then. So that was a few days there. They got him on some antidepressants, and he actually responded really, really well to them. So that was a bit of a turning point. Things were doing well.
I can't imagine how scary that would be as a mom to know that your child is thinking these things and you can't be with them 24/7. Are they okay? What's going on this moment? Like, thank God he was so open with you about what he was thinking.
And just, I can't imagine how heart-wrenching it would be to just want them to be able to see themselves and know how loved they are and see themselves how you see them and how God sees them. And, you know, and it would just break your heart thinking that they don't know that or feel that for themselves. And you know.
Cole always had a foundation with God, even through this whole journey for him. And he always did go back to that. But he was just never able to just grasp onto it and realize how loved he actually was.
Right.
Yeah, he couldn't see himself like that.
There was too much blurring that for him to be able to see that.
Yeah, and this is actually the first time I've talked about that part of the journey, because that mental health portion hasn't really been around for a few years, even though it drives the addiction for him. I haven't really thought too much about that in the last couple of years because of how much worse it kind of got after that. So it is interesting to kind of think about that and the whole journey that he's been on. So he did really, I think, grade 10, he was doing okay. The antidepressants did create, I can't remember the name of it. It's almost like a flatness to his emotion. Sometimes I think I've heard of that happening.
Like a stabilizer?
No, it was a antidepressant, so it increased his serotonin levels in his brain. But sometimes people can become almost flat, like almost emotionless. And we did notice that a little bit with him. And then so he got in trouble at school a lot. Grade 10, I think he got suspended 6 or 7 times that year. And so that was difficult. We were in Bowmanville at the time. We moved back to Port Perry, and he started at the alternative school rather than putting him in a regular stream high school, because it was just, we just didn't think it would be a great idea for him. He was also struggling with drugs again at this point. We knew he was smoking pot. He would quit smoking pot because he knew that it would cause these mental health episodes, and then he would be away from it for so long. And it was almost like he would forget what would happen. He'd be feeling okay. Or maybe it was, I mean, he's probably unpacking this where he is right now. Maybe it was so overwhelming, he was self-medicating. He didn't necessarily interact with the right people, didn't choose the right girlfriends, that kind of stuff, which wasn't helpful. But over the next couple of years, things were okay. I knew he was doing some drugs here and there. He knew I wasn't okay with it. He knew he couldn't bring anything into the house. But I just wanted him to graduate high school at this point. I didn't see him as having an addiction. He managed to graduate high school by the grace of God. He graduated high school.
That's amazing.
It was amazing for him to be going all through all this and those struggles, but graduate high school. Durham Alternative School, if any kids that are struggling with mainstream high school, it's such a fabulous place. And the one that they have in Port Perry, I can't even say enough good things about it. He had a teacher there, and she was just phenomenal. I still talk to her off and on now. She really connected with Cole. She appreciated him. She's wonderful. And so to have that connection as well was helpful. So yeah, he graduated high school, which I always said, I just need to get him to graduate high school. That was always my thing. Just got to get him to high school and then he's on his own. Well, it didn't really work out like that. He graduated high school and got a car. And the car was kind of the start of the downward spiral for him. It gave him a freedom that he was 18, so didn't really have much say in what was going on. He just knew that certain things were only allowed in my house. And I think when I look back now, I was a bit of an enabler. You know, I just kind of ignored some stuff that I didn't really want to deal with him. So that was kind of difficult. So he was off, he would be gone for the weekends, and I just assumed he was staying at friends' places on the weekend. And I think I kind of hid my head in the sand, to be honest. Didn't really want to know what was going on. He would come back on Sunday and go to work on Monday. So I didn't really faze me. I knew he wasn't right. In hindsight, I knew that there were problems, but I didn't really want to deal with them either.
Or what to do.
Yeah, how to deal with it. He was a grown man at 18, or they say they're grown men at 18, but they're not. But I didn't really know what to do.
There's no handbook on how to handle those any years, but especially those teenage years. You want them to come to you and tell you everything they're struggling with or everything they're going through, but you also want them to know what you will tolerate and what you won't. So it's like, how do you walk that line of letting them know what you won't stand for, but also letting them know that it's okay to talk to you if they're struggling with something that you're not okay with.
Yeah.
So
Having grace too,
yeah,
I think.
it's like, how do you do that?
Walking out my faith and to show him that as well
Yeah.
was also something that was important to me, because I knew at some point he would go back to his faith. I always felt like if he has a foundation, I felt like he would. During those years, I would find bags of pot. I would find grinders. I would find all kinds of stuff. He was stealing from us. He would, go into the safe, and it did get to the point where it's like, oh, I left my purse downstairs. I'm such an idiot. I would blame myself for things, almost kind of like an abusive relationship. I left my purse downstairs. It has my keys in it. It has the key for the safe. And I go to the safe and the benzos would be missing. And he's either taken them, sold them. I don't know what he'd done with them. Jewelry would go missing, money, cash. I would find drugs and throw them out, flush them. He would get really angry. Really angry, because it was, I knew at that point he was probably selling drugs too, because I wasn't finding just small amounts. And he knew that when I was younger too, I dabbled a little bit. So when I would find stuff, I wasn't kind of naive to know that, this isn't for personal use. This is a large amount. And then I started to find like straws. I'm like, ooh, this is a whole different ball of wax. But I also know that kind of in the area that we live, that there is a little bit of a problem with cocaine. I mean, there's drug problems everywhere, but I knew specifically that there was. So anyway, he got the car and he was going off, and he was 18. We had a little run-in with the law, but he had been under the age of 18. It went through a diversion when they're young. They can put them through diversion where they can, do some community stuff, and it gets, sealed, not a big deal. So he came home one morning flipping out. Of course, the police didn't contact me because he was 18. He had been arrested in his car for possession for the purpose of trafficking heroin. And yeah, that was... Now, they guess what the drug is. So I didn't believe even from the beginning that it was heroin. I knew it wasn't, just because of the path that he'd been on. But obviously it was some kind of drug that I wasn't too familiar with. And so he had these charges, and the police dropped him off at the end of the driveway. And so basically he probably felt like his life was over. I think he was left in the car. I don't know whether he'd overdosed or done too many drugs or whatever he'd done. And when the police showed up, everybody bailed and left all the drugs with him. So he got everyone else's stuff as well. So it was difficult to deal with. I kind of swooped in. It's like, Mom's going to help you, Mom to the rescue. Let's get you a lawyer. Let's do this. Let's do that. Still not even realizing that he had a major problem. Just thinking, he's hanging out with the wrong friends. He's got the wrong people in his life, that kind of thing. So they dealt with it. He ended up with some probation. He did really well because he wasn't allowed a cell phone. He had to be home at 9:00. He had all these bail release conditions. And so he did really well. And then as soon as that was done and he was allowed a cell phone back, I started to see him turn. Again, not doing very well. I have a 9-year-old and a 1-year-old at home. My 9-year-old, I wouldn't say she'd been exposed to drugs, but she'd been exposed to
the effects
and the
use.
chaos, the chaos that comes in the house, the yelling, the screaming, the tears. The tears were a lot of crying, a lot of being upset, a lot of late nights, not knowing where he is. So I finally was like, I can't do this anymore. You can't live here anymore. You have to go move in with your dad. So he moved in with his dad, and that lasted about 6 weeks. And then he moved in to a house in town, and it just spiraled completely out of control from there. He had no boundaries. He could do what he wanted, when he wanted. Whoever he moved in with, it was just fun and games. He could do what he wanted, when he wanted. And we still kind of had a relationship a little bit. And that's when I realized he really did have an addiction. It was a problem. So I started to go into a support group, Nar-Non, which is amazing. amazing support group, I started to learn that I was enabling what he was doing, which was not going to help him at all. I started putting my own boundaries up. I had to protect myself. I had 2 other kids to raise. I had to protect them. And things were starting to happen. Like he had broken into the house while we were gone to steal things. You know, my daughter was scared because she didn't know who broke into the house and things like that. So it was becoming a little out of control. I got cameras at the house because of the people that he was interacting with as well. It became a little more scary. Yeah, it got out of control really fast. And I wouldn't give him his car back. And I found videos on his phone of him doing drugs while he was driving. So he was putting himself at risk and other people at risk. I was, nope, this is not happening on my watch. And that's when I really learned what giving someone to God was. Because I had been giving him to God and then taking him back. And then giving him and then taking him back. Giving him and taking him back.
Right.
I knew I had to just give him and let go, which I don't know how I did it. I wouldn't have been able to do it without God, that's for sure. But I knew that I could do nothing because I had tried to do everything to help him. He called the police on me to get his car returned to him. So that was kind of the bottom line for me when the police showed up at the door. And I had to explain to them why I wouldn't give them his car back because he's going to do drugs and drive it and kill somebody. And they were like, oh, okay. And they left. And I showed up where he was living and I was very angry with him. And I was kind of out of control. And I pushed him. I told him I hated him. I told him he was a piece of shit drug dealer. I said some things that I never thought I would ever say to my kid. But I was so hurt. And I didn't know what to do anymore.
At the end of your rope?
I was so far at the end of my rope. And it was not a good choice because I could have gotten myself in a lot of trouble. I was also at a house where I didn't know if it was safe either. But as I was walking away, he was yelling at me saying, you really think I want this life for myself? And so I knew he was still in there somewhere. But I knew that he knew that if he ever wanted help, he could call me. His probation officer too. I was quite close with her. And I said, if ever he wants to go to treatment, you can call me. I will take him. So I didn't speak to him for a few weeks, maybe 4 or 5 weeks after that. And then his probation officer called me and said, I have Cole here. He wants to go to detox, but we think he might have a broken foot. Would you take him to the hospital while I try and find him a bed? I said, sure, definitely. So I got my mom to come over and watch the little one. I went and picked him up, and the sight that I saw when he got in my vehicle, like he looked like, and I'm not trying to stereotype here, but he looked like a drug addict. He was so thin. His face was all drawn in. He was just not even there anymore. And I took him into the hospital, and I was so concerned with them giving him painkillers. I remember being so wrapped up in like, they can't give him painkillers because he's a drug addict. And he went outside for a cigarette, and I pulled the nurse aside and I said, he has a drug problem. And she put her hand on me and she looked at me. She said, it's okay, Mom, I know. She could tell just by looking at him. So that was a pretty big wow moment for me as well.
How long had it been since you had seen him last?
I think about 6 weeks.
Okay.
It had been. So it deteriorated pretty
Very
fast.
quick, yeah.
I've never asked him this, but I feel like me and his life may have been the only thing that was kind of keeping him slightly afloat at the end there. And when I kind of walked, because I was the last one to walk away, everybody had kind of walked away. And I don't have any... Initially, I was very upset with everybody. I was angry with him. How can you walk away from him? But then when I had to do it, I kind of understood why. It's for your own protection. Like his dad had to walk away. My parents walked away. Everybody walked away. And I was the last one too.
I think it's normal for the mom to be the last one to be able to see what other people might be able to see because he's your baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They always will be. Always will be. So they checked his foot. His foot was okay. He then got a message that the police had been at the house looking for him. So I said to him, why don't you let me take you to the police station? Because they're just going to come back and try and find you. Let's just go. So he said, sure. So we went to the police station. They didn't want to talk to him. Later that night, he was arrested. I guess they did want to talk to him. He'd been calling me to bail him out. I was like, nope, not doing it. I had my boundaries pretty strong. At this point, I had a sponsor through Nar-Anon. So Nar-Anon is very similar to NA, which is similar to AA. So Nar-Anon is the family group. So you have a sponsor, someone that's kind of removed, because it's very difficult. You know, if I would talk to my mom or
Right.
they're not removed from the situation.
Yeah.
So
They're emotionally
invested.
so,
Yeah. So he ended up getting out on self bail. Our justice system needs some work.
Yeah.
How do you bail yourself out?
You basically, I don't know the ins and outs of it, but basically he had to check in every week. He had to have a residence. He had to,
I remember you
really
telling me
know.
about this, and I was like, what do you mean they let him check himself out? So
Yeah.
you're arrested if you want to be, but if you don't want to be, you can go.
I don't really know the ins and outs of it, but he self-bailed is what happened. And it just continued to get worse. And I thought maybe he was going to get help. He was going to come home, and he didn't make it home. He went to the house. So, okay, I guess we're not communicating anymore again. I had to cut myself off again. So I think the expectation that he was going to want to get help when I thought he should get help, that was difficult for me as well.
And I'm sure just the hoping, okay, please God, let this be it. You know, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the wake up call. Maybe this is where he turns around.
Yeah.
And then to find that it's not.
No.
You know, I just can't imagine how disheartening and disappointing that would feel to be like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to go through this again.
Yeah.
You know, and
is he going to make
so
it
desperately for this to be what it takes to turn him around?
Yeah, because in that time period, because sometimes my timeline gets a little confused, he had overdosed in that time as well. So, and he told me he'd overdosed. He's always been very straight and very honest with me about everything that's happened, which most of the time I'm appreciative of. Sometimes it's difficult, the honesty, because I'm his mom and I worry about him, but he had overdosed in here as well. He was okay. I carry a Narcan kit with me everywhere I go. Some people think that that's a little weird, but you know, we have a bit of an epidemic right now, so I'd rather have a kit on me than not.
Of course.
All right. So a Narcan kit, just if someone has overdosed of opiates, it can bring them back. They are free, covered by OHIP. You can get them at Shoppers Drug Mart.
It's so great. It's so scary nowadays that how normal that is to happen.
It is a total epidemic right now. So it kind of continued from there. This whole time this had been happening, the church, you guys, everybody was praying.
Yeah.
He just needs to survive. I had given him to God so many times, and it was just like, you have to do this because nobody else can do this but you. You're the only one that can save him. And I was sitting in church on a Friday night, and a friend of his that he was living with's mother sent me a video of him extremely high, extremely wasted, waving a gun around. And I was in church when it happened, and they stopped the service and we prayed. And I knew what I had to do. I knew that I was going to be the mom to go to the police station, which was a very difficult move as well. But it really was a no-brainer for me. I knew I had to. I could not live with him killing himself or somebody else. That I could not live with. I could live with him being in a jail cell. Not where I want him, but I could live with that. So I went to the
decision I have to make.
Yeah, it was difficult. So I went to the police station. Now they wanted the video. They wanted me to give them the video, and I wouldn't. I said, I'm not giving you evidence. I'm his mom, I'm not going to give you evidence. You do what you have to do, but this is what I saw. So they arrested him. I spoke to him that morning right before they arrested him. He was really out of it. And then he had a bail hearing on the Monday. I went to the bail hearing. I just wanted him to see my face. I was not going to bail him out. Adamant that this was the opportunity that God had given us. Because once you self-bail once, they won't do it again. But that's it. You're in there. And he already had to deal with some charges. So he's going to be sitting there for a while. At least if he's in there, he's alive. I showed up for the bail hearing. So he was in Lindsay jail. And this was in the Oshawa courthouse. And all the other inmates were there except him. And they were talking about a suicide attempt. And at that moment, I realized that they were talking about him. And nobody could tell me anything. There's privacy surrounding the fact that this, he's 19 years old. They don't know what's going on. So for probably close on 2 hours, I didn't know if he was alive or not. And that was really difficult.
Jeez.
I managed to find out that it wasn't an attempt. He was actually withdrawing. So I think when they picked him up, from what I understand, he was on quite a cocktail when they picked him up. So when he came off of all that stuff in jail, I think it's not very pretty. So he probably said some things, and they probably stuck him in somewhere to kind of come off of it, which I'm really glad they had got to deal with that and not me, because I couldn't imagine what that would have been like. And then by that afternoon, they are calling me. Duty counsel is calling me to bail him out. I'm like, pardon?
Oh my gosh.
Right? I'm like, let me get this right. There are doctors in there. There are mental health nurses in there. He can get help in there. He just had a problem with potential suicide this morning. You're calling me 5 hours later asking me if I can bail him out? No. So the system is definitely messed up. So for the next, probably, I didn't hear from him for about 7 days. Our pastor went in to see him, which was reassuring. He was in there for a total of 3 months. Over that period of 3 months, when he first started calling me, he would call me a few times a day. Very anxious, very upset. Get me out, get me out, get me out. And I would just say, well, you're going to have a prison term anyway. How it works with jail is if you're in there, when you can be bailed out, it's actually considered time and a half. So of your sentence. So it's like, just stay in there, get this done. So by the time your sentence goes through, you have most of it done. And at the time, I'd been talking about Teen Challenge for probably 2 years at this point. I knew it was a great facility. I knew it was a 1-year program. I knew the 30, 60, 90-day programs, their success rate was not nearly as good as Teen Challenge. I knew it was faith-based program. That's where I desperately wanted him to go. But that was my idea of his recovery. And I also recognized that if he was going to be in recovery, that could be his own idea of what that was going to look like, not mine. It's not my life. So we started to see a change in him after his final court date. The judge started talking to him about Teen Challenge, which was kind of a wow God moment. The judge said to him, talked to him like a father figure, which was amazing. Said to him, if you're going to be back in here unless you do something. You have a problem. You need to get help. Teen Challenge is an amazing facility. Also at that point too, the Crown decided to say in open court that it was me that turned him in. I hadn't told Cole that. So I was expecting him not to deal with that very well. He called me the very next day and told me that he understood why I did it. So this is when I started to see changes in him.
Right.
That he was okay with the fact that,
you turned him in.
I turned him in. Yeah. So once we got on the visitor's log and we would go visit him every week, I could see changes in him. And by the end of his stay, he was there for 3 months in Lindsay. By the end of his stay, we would show up and he would be smiling. He was in an orange jumpsuit with this big, massive smile on his face. And it was like, what is going on in there? He had connected with the chaplain there. He'd been doing some Bible studies in there. He really started to turn back to his faith. I didn't really know this. I think he'd been talking to our pastor a little bit about it, but I could see the change in him. And even before that, I would pray with him on the phone. So he was feeling it from me a little bit as well. I would write to him all the time. He started to not want to talk to any of his friends, didn't want them knowing anything about him, where he was, what he was doing. So that's a bit of a change as well when you start to see that part of things. But also recognizing that you can't have expectations. Because when you have expectations, that's when you get let down. Because relapse is very, very, it's fairly high.
Yeah.
Relapses. So by the time he got out, he had signed up himself to Teen Challenge through the addiction counselors in Lindsay Jail. So they have counselors in there that can help. And I feel like so weird to say I'm thankful that my son went to jail. Such an odd thing to say. But I feel like he found God in jail. He did.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So he came out and he had put on probably 30 to 40 pounds in weight. He was happy. He was interacting with us. He was just wanted to be around us. Now, he didn't really want to be in our town, so I didn't get to see him a whole lot. He wanted to be kind of, because he didn't want to run into anybody.
Yeah.
So that was good. An excellent thing. And the only thing he was a little leery about with Teen Challenge was that it's a 1-year program. So I think, you know, he just turned 20. I think that was normal.
Yeah.
You know, I think when you're 20 a year is
It's a
like
commitment. Yeah. Like
a
it's
huge amount of
commitment.
time.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. So he's been there for a month. I went to see him on Saturday and it was so amazing. He's doing so well. I'm in awe. I'm in awe of what God can do. It is so overwhelming to see God work through him and to see his love for God. He always had the word and God in his head. It was just never in his heart, like that relationship. And I see that. And when I went to Teen Challenge on the weekend, the facility is phenomenal. The camaraderie between the men there is just astounding. And I left there so happy that he is where he needs to be. He knows he's supposed to be there. He knows that this is the journey that God has him on. He's happy. He's healthy. He knows what he has to work on. That's kind of where we're at.
I remember us constantly saying as well through all of these years that like this is just all part of his testimony. This is part of his testimony. You know, he's going to come out of this. God is going to use this. Like I feel like for the enemy to have such an attack and a target on him to try and bring him down as fast and hard as he did, there has to be a call on his life. There has to be a huge purpose on his life. And we would just constantly just say that when he was going through all of this. This is part of his testimony. This is part of his testimony. He's going to get through it. God's going to use it.
I remember saying that and not even really believing it, but just saying
Sometimes you
it.
just have to speak
Sometimes
it.
you have to
Even if
speak
you don't
it.
really believe it. Speak it until you believe it.
But I remember Cole being 8 or 9 in church and it was prophesied over his life for street ministry. I've heard that 3 or 4 times when he was younger. And he also, when he got out of jail, that couple of weeks before he went to Teen Challenge, I think it's common when they're in recovery to deal with some of the stuff that they did when they were in active addiction. And he had no one to talk to but me. And some of the stuff he told me is just mind-boggling. I thank God that he's alive because it is by the grace of God that he's alive. Some of the stuff that he was involved in and what he was doing, definitely. But he also told me that when he was in deep, he prayed for God to get him out of it. And the next day he was arrested and he was so angry at God, thinking, how is this getting me out of it? Not realizing that that's how you get out of it, is to get removed. But he also felt when he was in jail, God tell him that he was going to use him. But he didn't say it to any of us until he heard us talk about it, because he felt very small still, very, you know, how can God use me? And it's like, well, he most definitely can. That's for sure.
God is in the business of redemption. And I think he favors redemption, of pulling people out of the lowest, darkest places and elevating them to the highest, most powerful places where, you know, they can really reach people and touch people's lives.
And he was baptized. He actually asked our pastor before I knew. He wanted to be baptized when he came out of jail, and he was, and it was such an amazing, that moment I have daydreamed about for years, like literally driving in my car, listening to some Christian music, you know, like in my head, oh, one day Cole will get baptized, thinking it probably was not going to happen, or at least because you do get into the depths of despair. Definitely. I actually found,
and when you just look at the circumstance, it seems so far off.
So far away.
You know.
So far away. I actually have a couple of journal entries that I brought with me that I thought maybe I would read.
That's so cool.
That I read the other day, and I thought, wow, it was such a dark place, right? So this was February of this year. Will he make it out alive? Sometimes and more often I think and believe yes. Other times if I let my mind go there, it goes to a dark place where he doesn't make it out alive. It kills him. It's almost as if by going there in my head, I'm trying to prepare my heart from not completely exploding if it does happen. What would his funeral look like? Whose face is what I see? Would I be able to get through it? Would I be able to speak? If I could speak, what would I say? I think about how lovely he was. Could he be there again? Yeah. So reading that stuff is difficult. And then I have one here from April 20th. When he went into jail, I believe it was the middle of May. So this is when things would have been pretty bad as well. An overdose, jail, and the homeless shelter. And we're right back to where we were before, using. He says he's not, but I'm not bothered to even look into it further. I'm not sure whether I'm getting stronger or maybe God in me is getting stronger. When he talks, not much I find interesting. I just look at him and think, where's my boy? Who are you? He seems uncomfortable around me, yet still continues to try to shock me. Maybe he sees me getting stronger and wants to rock that a bit. I pray one day he sees his self-worth, he sees his potential, he sees how much God loves him.
It's crazy to look back and see how full circle things have come and how important decisions were then that you didn't even know at the time. Like how you initially put him in the Christian school because he was just having a hard time in the public school. But how important that step was, what a huge difference that made in his life, and you know, built that foundation for him. And even just you saying before how when you were baptized, you sat up and immediately saw him and knew something was wrong. So it's so cool to look back at the circle being that moment when you were baptized, when you realized something was first wrong, to now he just got baptized.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah. And I also I didn't mention it earlier, it was the summer of grade 8 when he started to struggle. In the spring of grade 8, I had a vision in church. And right in the middle of worship, I was holding him in my arms. It was like he was sleeping, because I remember not being worried or upset about it. And I just handed him up to Jesus, literally, like he was sleeping. And I had this vision right in the middle of church. I remember thinking, that's kind of weird, because there was no problem that I knew of at that time. Like everything was fine. 6 weeks later, crap hit the fan and off we go. But it took me many years to be able to actually truly hand him over. And I still, even now, struggle a little, definitely. It's going to be a long process. And I probably will always struggle. This is going to be a lifelong thing for him. Yeah. And he, you know, we have talked about, you know, addiction sometimes can bounce to different areas. Like if he has problems with drugs, you know, alcohol, pornography, gambling, it could jump around. So he is going to have to be very aware. Because now that he said to me on the weekend, now that he's found Jesus, he just wants to tell all those people that are lost. Right. I'm like, so sweet, Cole. So sweet. But you have to get stronger, you know, like he needs to get stronger himself.
Before he immerses him.
Which is why it's a 1-year program.
That's why it's a 1-year program. And I think their success rate, last I read, is 94%, which is incredible percentage.
I've heard nothing but amazing stories come out of Teen Challenge.
Yeah. I was just in awe. And I had to call them this morning and tell them how in awe of them I was. Because it's good for them to have that feedback. Because I had been talking to Ernie, is one of the intake workers there. He's fabulous. And I've been talking to him on and off for 2 years. It's almost like we became phone friends. Still working on trying to get Cole there. But then he signed up all on his own. So
wow.
Yeah, I think it's important. And I spoke to Cole this weekend about this podcast and about reaching out into the community, because there are so many people that are hurting. And for me, obviously, my heart is with moms, spouses, people that are affected by the addiction of somebody else, because it is a family disease. It's not just the person that struggles with it. And it is a disease. There's still people think that it's a choice. It initially may start out as a choice, but it's not. It's a disease. And a lot of times it starts out in the pharmacies. You know, that's a big thing too. People get prescribed painkillers for any number of things: broken arms, broken legs, wisdom teeth, and that's where it starts. And from there, it can go. It may not be someone trying an illicit street drug. It can be anything. So my heart is with people like what I've been through. Cole's heart is definitely with people that struggle with addiction. But I asked him this week and I said, how do you feel about me taking more of an active role? And he's like, well, that's what I plan on doing. So go for it. So is there anything you don't want me to talk about? Nope. He's kind of an open book about it. So
wow. It's just amazing. The power of prayer, eh?
Yeah.
Oh. And I remember too when our pastor from our church, Pastor John, he's so amazing. I remember when he was the first one to see Cole in jail because, pastors have privileges at jail before we can even get on lists.
Right.
And I remember him, he's always been such a straight guy with me, just tells me how it is. And he was calling me on his way and he's like, okay, Jaime, I'm not going to go if you're going to bail him out next week. I'm not going to go see him. I'm like, I'm not. It's okay. I won't. Okay. Because, God's given us this opportunity and we're going to use it, right? I'm like, yeah. It was like that actually when I put Cole in the Christian school.
Yeah.
My mom was a Christian at the time. We weren't. And I said to my mom, do you think it'll be okay to put him in Christian school if we don't go to church? She's like, why didn't you call my pastor? And I remember feeling like I was calling God. I was so nervous. And I called him and I said to him, do you think it would be? And he was so straight with me. He's like, yep, that's going to be real confusing. And kind of hypocritical. And I remember thinking, okay, I guess I'm going to have to put some Sundays in. And wow. Did life ever change? Me and my mom actually have always conflicted over Cole. Like we're talking doozy fights, doozy arguments, and we've never really seen things the same way. We've actually really learned to live with it and have that dynamic because we had to.
Yeah.
But it's difficult, and to reach out to a support group and get help is so important because these are people, the women that I've connected with, they are some of my closest friends because they know what it's like. Some of their kids are in recovery. Some of them aren't. Some of them haven't spoken to their kids in years. I'm part of a group too on Facebook called The Addict's Mom, and it's mothers around the world. And every day there's I would say at least some days it's just one post. Some days it's 4 or 5 where their kids have died. Wow. And it's so heartbreaking just to see, their kid didn't make it.
What would you say to a mom or a dad or a family member who's dealing with somebody addicted to drugs?
I think the most important thing is that you have to turn the focus back on yourself. You have to get yourself better because you become an enabler without realizing it, and then you also become codependent. I was codependent on Cole. My happiness was determined on how he was doing. So, which may seem like a logical thing, but you still have to live your life. You still have to. You have to turn the focus back on yourself, which you can't just do on your own. You need to find support. So things like Al-Anon, Nar-Anon, there's other groups as well. That was just the group that I connected with right off the bat. Really helped. But you have to get help because trying to make someone do something that they don't want to do, it's just never going to happen.
Yeah, never.
It just won't work. I'm yet to hear of any court mandated drug treatment in Canada. Like it wasn't even an option. I spoke so many times to Cole's lawyer. No. Now in the States, I think they have it, but here it doesn't really seem to be much of a thing. They don't mandate it. I remember Cole telling me that, now he probably doesn't know the exact stats, but he's like, oh yeah, 70% of the people in jail shouldn't be in there. They have addictions, that just drove the behavior behind what they were doing.
Right. Yeah.
So it's definitely a massive issue. But yeah, get yourself help because you can't do anything. You need to be a good friend of mine, very good friend of mine, once told me you have to be a lighthouse. You have to be sturdy and strong and bright. The lighthouse doesn't go out to find the ship in the fog. The lighthouse stands there and waits for the boat to find the lighthouse. And that's what you have to become. So you have to be strong and you have to build yourself up. And the only way to do that is to get yourself help. And then you hope that they get help based on that. They may never not.
I love that. It's so true because you can't force someone else to get help or to to want help.
I tried.
All you can do is get yourself help to try and deal with what's in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to have my phone on all night long waiting for phone calls. And then as I started to get better myself, I would shut my phone off at 9:00, which seemed weird to some people. How can you do that? How can you sleep at night? It just...
Because I feel like if you don't, then you become just as much of a slave to the addiction as they are.
You become just as sick.
Yeah.
Because you become, you know, like FBI investigator, like looking
It'll
for
consume
things.
you.
It totally consume you, completely consume everything that you do. Everything that you do. And that's not helpful because it will just push them away anyway. They're just going to run from you.
Right.
But when I was just still, and that was not through anything that I did. That was God and the support group that I had around me, which sometimes I was calling them 3 or 4 times a day in tears, crying. What do I do? Nothing. What do you mean nothing? Nothing. Do nothing. How do you do
so
nothing?
hard when you're just
So
mama bear that
hard.
wants to come to the rescue and
hard.
make everything better.
Yeah, but it was right. It's the right advice.
Yeah.
That's
But it would
hardest
go
thing to
against
do.
everything in you.
Everything in you.
You have been through some shit.
Sure have. Haven't we all? We all have a story. But
It's so true.
yeah. My other 2 girls are going to be great teenagers. P.S. Not going to have any issues there.
Well, I'm just so happy to see where Cole is now and to see the pictures of him that I've seen that you've shared.
Looks like a different
He
person.
looks like a completely different person.
He does.
Totally changed. Completely. You can see it like in his countenance and his eyes. Just his like everything is different.
Yeah.
He's been totally redeemed. It's just amazing to see.
Sometimes we put God in this box.
Yeah.
God like explodes the box. Bam.
Look what I can do.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, if there's any other people that are sitting in this boat right now that could use Jamie's contact info to talk to, or maybe
I mean, I
'cause that would be
know
pretty cool.
NA has a great program. Pinewood didn't really work for Cole. Doesn't mean it's not going to work for someone else. I mean,
Right.
just to reach out to somewhere to
Yeah.
get help. I mean, but there's all kinds of programs out there. But the family, there isn't as much. But Naranon is kind of all over the place. There's also, there's NA, there's Smart Recovery. Teen Challenge is where it's at. And that can be confusing because it's actually 18 and up, 18 to 65. So it's
Okay.
actually not for teenagers. It's unless you're 18. But the men's facility, and there is a women's facility as well. They'd be able to tell you more. There is support.
There are
out
places you can go to reach out and get help, or just to talk to somebody else who's been there or who is there and who's going through that, and you feel like maybe nobody else understands, or you know, like you said, everybody has an opinion but nobody really understands. Reach out to the Naranon, or reach out to us, and we can get you in touch with Jamie, or maybe help you find somebody in your area. There is support and there is hope.
Yeah. And there is actually a really great documentary on YouTube, Nova Addictions by PBS, and it explains the brain and addiction and how it is actually a disease. That was a bit of a struggle in my family too. You know, there was a lot of, he just needs to get his shit together.
Yeah.
He needs to
just
grow
needs to
up.
stop.
Like a lot of
needs-
people feel like that. They don't understand
They don't
addiction,
understand
so-
it. And it crosses gender, it crosses class, it crosses everything. It doesn't matter where you're born, where you're from.
Doesn't discriminate.
That's the word I was looking for.
And
It
I
does
think-
not discriminate.
I think a lot of people can try. How can you keep doing this to me? You know, looking at the behavior of an
Yes.
addict, of how can you keep doing this when you see you're destroying your family, you're stealing from me, and that, you know, and turn it on yourself.
He dealt with a lot of that as well from family. You know, a lot of people were very angry with him for how he was doing this to me.
Yeah.
And I always knew that it was a problem. I never myself, I'm thankful that I kind of understood addiction a little bit, because there was some addiction in my family, and generally there are some generational things with addiction.
Right.
I understood addiction a little bit more, that it is not, he never did anything to me. It wasn't doing it to me. I was just a byproduct of what he was doing.
As an addict, you would. You know, if you're stealing from your family to fund your habit, or then you turn around and you just feel even worse about yourself for doing it. So then you turn around and medicate more because you feel horrible about yourself, and just, you know, it's this vicious cycle that you don't want to be in, but you can't help but continue to find yourself in. And, you know, and it can just be like this circle of a trap.
That's a big part of it. Some of the things that people that struggle with, you know, substance use disorder, I'm trying to use that word a little bit more because I think people that struggle with it don't necessarily like the term addict. And I can understand that. They do get trapped in that, and they, you know, they can turn to prostitution. Cole, it was selling drugs. You know, some of the stuff I found out he was doing, I was just, how could you do that? But when there's such a drive there to do it, and wanting more and wanting more and wanting more, you do whatever you can to get more.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us, and being so honest about, you know, some parts too that I'm sure weren't easy to talk about or to say out loud or to admit. But I think those are the things that help the most people feel less alone. I'm not the only one. You know?
Thanks for having
I've been
me.
in that place of desperation.
Yeah.
You know, I know how she feels. She's talking to me.
Yeah.
You know.
I have started to, there's a lot of stigma with addiction, a lot of stigma. And I have started to try and break, because I have permission, or I feel like I have permission from Cole now to break through that a little bit.
Yeah.
And I've had some, you know, people not necessarily agree with what I'm doing, some posts that I'm putting out on Facebook, Instagram, you know, about addiction. But the response, I'm having people reach out to me that are in this.
Yeah.
You have to look past the
How can
people
you
that
have
are going to
to?
be, you know, not receptive to it, in order to reach the people that are receptive to it and need to hear it
They're
or
not
see
the
it.
ones who need it.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
doesn't really matter what they think.
It's about changing mindsets
Yeah.
as well. I remember one last thing, when after I picked up Cole when he got out of jail, on our way home we had to stop at the pharmacy because he was on some pretty heavy medication while he was in there, because, you know, his chemicals in his brain are messed up.
Yeah.
You know, his dopamine levels, things are off from, you know, a few years of doing drugs and such heavy drugs and the amount of drugs. And I went in to get the prescription, and I needed the pharmacist to explain what was what to me because I didn't really understand. And obviously I was going to be holding the medication as well.
Right.
While I was waiting for the pharmacist, there was a couple ladies working behind the pharmacist that one of them started talking about where she used to work. And she was saying, you know, the area I used to work in, Oshawa, it was gross. It was disgusting. There were addicts, drug addicts around. Very openly talking about this in a pharmacy.
Right. Yeah.
So the pharmacist came back and I asked about the medication. And I just said, you know, can I talk to you? And he said, sure. And I said, you know, I don't know whether you notice where the prescription I'm picking up is from. I said, but I just picked up my 19-year-old son from Lindsay Maximum Security Jail. He struggles with addiction. And I said, in the conversation that your staff just had, I don't want to get anybody in trouble.
Yeah.
But maybe they need to understand that a good number of addictions start right where you are.
Yeah.
And he was extremely apologetic, very mortified that that had happened. Things like that, where people just need to be
So quick to be
educated.
judgmental. And
That too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times, I mean, honestly, heroin is not that far off morphine. You know, some people don't understand that. It is almost the same thing.
Right. Yeah.
So when people are, you know, taking painkillers for so long and then the doctors cut them off like that, where do they go? That's how they end up there. You know, do they want to go through withdrawal and not have, it's like breathing to them.
one thing I want to ask, did you ever struggle with any part of feeling like a failure as a parent? Or people would think that, well, maybe if he had more guidance and discipline at home, he wouldn't be where he is now. He wouldn't be dabbling with drugs, or, you know, people that assume that, people that are always like, well, maybe he didn't have any discipline.
Constant.
You know what I mean?
That is a constant thing. Also, like I said, me and his dad divorced when he was young. Cole also went through a trauma when he was younger as well. And so all of that stuff as a mom, did I swoop in and rescue him too much? And that's why he has no coping skills. So he can't cope. So he does drugs. That is a constant thing. Guilt is a very constant thing.
I can just imagine how many parents there would be out there that would try and hide it, not want people to know.
Constant.
You know, because that's a reflection on me as a parent. You know what I mean? People are going to judge and think that I didn't raise him in a good home, or, whatever people are going to say or think it's going to be about me.
Most of the time now, when people ask, I'm pretty forthcoming with it.
Yeah.
Still the odd time, I don't get into it because it depends who's asking.
Yeah.
Right.
Like I exchanged some shoes today and I have to send them to London. Oh, is your son back at school? Yes.
Yeah.
I'm obviously not going to get into it, right?
Yeah.
But I remember working right around the time everyone's kid was going to university. And my kid was not. And I struggled with that a lot. How's Cole doing? Good. He's just taking a year off. He's just working. Like I didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
Like that was really difficult. Oh, my son's going to university. He's doing this. He's doing that. And I literally would be like, good for you in my head. I would never say it out loud.
Yeah.
That
Good
was,
for you.
that was where my anger was at. I was very angry and upset that was not happening. But through my support group, I had to let those expectations go. I had these massive expectations on Cole. As a Christian, the best thing I can hope for my son is that he knows how much God loves him, and that he knows that if he was the only one that Jesus had to go to the cross for, he still would have done it.
Yeah.
I want him to know that love. That's pretty much about it. Because if he knows that, then he has an identity in that.
Yeah. There's no judgment in Jesus. There's grace in Jesus.
So much grace. I think that's why he loves the New Testament so much. He's got like his pocketbook New Testaments because it's all about grace.
And redemption.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Redemption.
Thank you for being so open and candid and sharing and letting our potty people in
My pleasure.
on such a painful journey. And
This day and age too, how many people are be able to relate to this?
how many people are going through this?
Yeah.
Or,
This is the first of a journey for me. I feel like I'm on a journey with him. There's some connections that I've made that I want to explore as well. This is the first time sharing the story on kind of a bit of a platform. So I was excited to do that and how that would look and what to do with it. So it's been
It means a lot that you chose to do that here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I love you.
Oh, I love you guys too. And it is so important to have that support group, have friends that support you and love you. And like what you said, Candace, don't judge you based on what your kids are doing.
Yeah.
That is so important. And don't judge your kids either.
Yeah.
Because I don't want people judging him on what he's doing either. And you never did that. You always knew I was struggling and you had a heart for where I was, but you never judged Cole. And Andy was always so amazing, would always pour into Cole. And that's the important things. Those are the things that he's going to remember. Pastor John always loved on him, never judged him, ever. And those are the things that when someone is finally going to face and deal with, for lack of a better term, deal with their demons, that's what they're going to remember. Not the person that was like, standing there judging them. The ones that had grace for them and
you
loved
have to
them.
love them through it. You can't give them another reason to run or hide it or, to give them another reason to hate themselves for it.
Yeah, they have enough.
You know what I mean?
Where is the love? That's right.
Where is the love?
Oh, geez. What's going on
Why
in
does there
here?
always have to be a song? There's always a song.
See, you two can sing. I can't sing at all.
Song. Oh, man. Whether I can actually sing or not doesn't matter. I do it anyway.
You can sing. You've always been able to sing.
Oh, my goodness. Well, this has been amazing.
Thank you for having me.
It's time for that big ass bow.
Slap it.
Slap it. Slapping the bow.
Slapping the bowl.
Slapping the bow.
You guys are crazy.
Slapping the bow, man. All right. Well, guys, if you like what you hear,
Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your people that we
here. Oh, man. You can find us on Instagram. We're Honest to God Podcast. You can slip us a DM or you can email us at CanonTana Honest to God Podcast.
We'll catch you there, potty people. We out.
We'll be talking to you next time.
Until next time.
Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.